The darkness of space had never seen anything like this before. 10,000 warships hung in the void beyond the edge of the Sol system, their hulls gleaming with the light of distant stars. They came from 12 different species, 12 ancient civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for longer than humanity had existed. The Galactic Concord had assembled the greatest armada in recorded history, and they had come to deliver a simple message to the young species called humans. Surrender or die. High Arbiter Velkoth stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the holographic display with 4 of his 6 eyes. He was a Sithrani, a reptilian being covered in scales of deep purple, and his species had conquered more worlds than any other in the Concord. For 300 years, he had served as the voice of the Alliance, delivering ultimatums to primitive species and watching them crumble in fear. Today would be no different. "Open a channel to the human homeworld," Velkoth commanded, his voice cold and certain. His communications officer obeyed, and within moments, the transmission was live. Velkoth straightened his ceremonial robes and prepared to speak the words that had broken 1,000 civilizations before. "Attention, species designated as Terran," he began, letting each word drip with authority. "I am High Arbiter Velkoth of the Galactic Concord. You have violated sacred laws by expanding beyond your permitted boundaries. You have refused to pay tribute to your betters. You have shown disrespect to the natural order of the galaxy." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "The Concord has assembled to correct your behavior. You have 1 standard solar cycle to dismantle your fleet, surrender your colonies, and submit to protective integration as a servitor species. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." Velkoth ended the transmission with a satisfied hiss. He had delivered this speech many times, and he knew exactly what would happen next. The primitive leaders would panic. They would argue among themselves. Some would cry, some would beg, and eventually they would all surrender. It was the way of the galaxy. The bridge crew waited in confident silence. Several officers were already discussing how they would divide human territory among the Concord members. The Kreth wanted the mineral-rich asteroid belt. The Vorani had claimed rights to the ocean world called Europa. Everyone assumed the battle was already over. Then the response came. The holographic display flickered and a human face appeared. It belonged to a woman with gray hair and dark eyes that sparkled with something Velkoth could not identify. She wore a simple military uniform decorated with medals and ribbons. According to the data files, she was Admiral Chen Wei, the senior diplomatic officer of the Terran Defense Force. "High Arbiter Velkoth," she said, and her voice was calm, almost friendly. "Thank you so much for the advance notice. We really appreciate you taking the time to explain the situation so clearly." Velkoth blinked in confusion. This was not the response he expected. "I have received your ultimatum," Admiral Chung continued, "and I will make sure it reaches the appropriate authorities right away. In the meantime, would you and your fleet like any refreshments while you wait? We have excellent coffee on Earth, and I would hate for you to get bored out there in the cold void of space." She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Velkoth deeply uncomfortable. It was not the smile of a defeated enemy. It was not the nervous grin of someone trying to buy time. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, someone who was enjoying a private joke. "I must consult with my government," Admiral Chun said cheerfully. "Please give us a few hours to prepare our response. And again, thank you for coming all this way. It must have been quite a journey." The transmission ended. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell into stunned silence. Officers exchanged confused glances. Commander Threx, Velkoth's second-in-command, stepped forward with uncertainty in his voice. "High Arbiter, what just happened?" Did the human not understand the situation? Perhaps their translation technology is faulty. Velkoth shook his head slowly. No, the translation was perfect. I understood every word she said. Then why did she seem so calm? Why was she smiling? We brought 10,000 warships. We threatened to destroy her entire species. She should be terrified. Velkoth had no answer. In 300 years of service, he had never encountered a response like this. Every species reacted to the Concord's power with fear. The Kreth had surrendered after seeing just 100 ships. The Varani had wept and begged for mercy. Even the mighty Dralith had bent the knee when faced with certain destruction. But this human had smiled. She had offered them coffee. She had thanked them for coming. Perhaps they are simply too primitive to understand their situation, suggested Science Officer Yalith. Their species is barely 300 years old as a spacefaring civilization. They may not comprehend the power arrayed against them. Velkoth wanted to believe this explanation, but something in his gut told him otherwise. He had studied humans during the journey to their system. He had read reports about their history, their wars, their strange customs. They were a violent species, aggressive and territorial. They had spent their entire existence fighting each other over resources, religion, and ideas. And yet, when faced with an external threat, they had not panicked. They had not surrendered. They had smiled and offered refreshments. Increase sensor sweeps, Velkoth ordered. I want to know everything about their defensive capabilities. How many ships do they have? What weapons do they carry? Where are their forces positioned? The sensor officer worked quickly, and the results appeared on the main display. Velkoth studied them with growing confusion. The human fleet was small, barely 300 vessels. Their ships were crude compared to Concord technology, built from simple metals and powered by primitive fusion reactors. Their weapons appeared to be a mixture of energy projectors and something called kinetic accelerators. On paper, it was laughable. The Concord Armada outnumbered them 30-1. Their technology was centuries more advanced. Victory should be absolutely certain. And yet, Velkoth could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Why had the human smiled? What did she know that he did not? In the distance, hidden behind the massive bulk of Jupiter, the Terran fleet was preparing. Admiral Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the indomitable Will reading the Concord's ultimatum with a grin on his face. Around him, his officers were laughing, joking, making bets on how the battle would unfold. They had been waiting for this moment for 60 years. Send word to all ships, Admiral Cole commanded. Operation Welcome Party is a go. Let the guests know that humanity is ready to play. Admiral Marcus Cole had waited his entire life for this moment. He stood at the center of the command bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing every ship in his fleet. 300 vessels, each one crewed by men and women who had trained for years, who had dreamed of this day, who had prepared for the moment when humanity would finally show the galaxy what it was made of. Status report, Cole said, his voice steady and calm. Captain Sarah Okonkwo, his first officer, stepped forward with a tablet in her hands. All ships report ready, Admiral. Weapons charged, crews at battle stations, morale at an all-time high. The Marines are actually disappointed that we might not need ground forces. Cole smiled at that. Human Marines were a special breed, always eager for a fight, always ready to charge into the unknown. But today's battle would be fought in the void between worlds, ship against ship. Humanity against the combined might of 12 alien civilizations. Show me the enemy disposition, Cole ordered. The main holographic display shifted, revealing the Concord Armada in all its terrible glory. 10,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, their shields glowing with protective energy, their weapon arrays pointed toward Earth. Each ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, built by species that had mastered space travel when humanity was still learning to use fire. But Cole was not impressed. "Look at them," he said, pointing at the display. "Perfect formation, predictable spacing, textbook positioning. They fight the same way they have fought for 50,000 years. They expect us to do the same." Around him, his officers nodded in understanding. They had studied the Concorde's tactics for decades, analyzing every battle, every victory, every conquest. The aliens were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They believed their technology was unbeatable. They believed their methods were perfect. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy who could adapt, improvise, and overcome. "Sir," said Lieutenant Park, the communications officer, "we are receiving messages from across human space. Everyone wants to know what is happening." Cole chuckled. "Put the civilian channels on the secondary display." The screen lit up with feeds from Earth, Mars, the moon colonies, and the stations scattered throughout the solar system. News anchors were reporting on the alien armada with barely contained excitement. Social media was exploding with memes, jokes, and creative insults directed at the Concorde. On Mars, a group of colonists had painted a giant middle finger on the side of Olympus Mons, visible from orbit. The Concorde had come to terrify humanity into submission. Instead, humanity was throwing a party. "I love our species," Captain Okonkwo said with a laugh. Cole nodded in agreement. This was what made humans special. Other species faced extinction with despair and surrender. Humans faced extinction with dark humor and stubborn defiance. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and natural disasters. They had split the atom, walked on the moon, and colonized other worlds. They were not about to bow down to a bunch of overgrown lizards and their friends. "All right, everyone," Cole said, calling his officers to attention. "Let me explain what we are going to do to our guests." He activated the battle plan, codenamed Operation Welcome Party, and the display shifted to show a complex series of movements, attacks, and maneuvers. The officers studied it carefully, their eyes widening as they understood what Cole had in mind. "For 60 years, we have played the role of the naive newcomers," Cole began. "We smiled and nodded when the Concorde lectured us about our place in the galaxy. We pretended to be impressed by their technology. We let them believe we were weak, primitive, and easy to conquer." He zoomed in on the enemy formation. "But the whole time, we were watching and learning. We studied their weapons and built countermeasures. We analyzed their tactics and developed responses. We prepared for the day when they would come to enslave us." The display showed the human fleet breaking apart into dozens of smaller groups, each one moving independently toward the enemy. The Concorde fights in rigid formations. They target the biggest ships first. They use energy weapons that our magnetic shields can deflect. They communicate on frequencies we can jam. They think war is a formal dance with rules and traditions. Cole's smile grew wider. "We are going to teach them what human war looks like. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we never fight fair. We use kinetic weapons that punch through their energy shields like paper. We use electronic warfare to blind their sensors. We use stealth technology to appear from nowhere and vanish before they can respond." The officers were practically vibrating with excitement. For decades, they had trained for this moment, practicing maneuvers that the Concorde had never seen, developing weapons that alien scientists thought were impossible. Now, at last, they would put everything to the test. "What about casualties, Admiral?" asked Commander Reyes, the tactical officer. "We are outnumbered 30-1. Even with our advantages, we will lose ships." Cole's expression grew serious. "Yes, we will lose ships. We will lose good men and women. War always has a cost, and we will pay it. But I promise you this, for every human life lost today, the Concorde will pay 100 times over. They came here expecting an easy victory. They will leave here knowing the true price of threatening humanity. He looked around at his officers, meeting each of their eyes in turn. 60 years ago, when we first met the Concorde, they looked at us like we were insects. They called us primitive. They said we would never amount to anything. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity is not a species to be conquered. We are a species to be respected. The bridge erupted in cheers. Officers shouted and clapped, their voices echoing through the ship. On every vessel in the fleet, the same scene was playing out as commanders shared the battle plan with their crews. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen Wei watched the Concorde Armada through a telescope in her office. She had played her part perfectly, smiling and stalling while the fleet got into position. Now, she could only wait and trust that Marcus Cole would deliver the victory humanity needed. Her assistant entered the room with a cup of tea. "Admiral, are you worried?" Chun took the cup and sipped slowly. "Worried?" "No. Excited?" "Very much so. The Concorde thinks they are the hunters. They are about to learn that they are the prey." Outside, the stars twinkled peacefully, unaware of the violence that was about to erupt. In a few hours, the darkness would be filled with fire and light, with death and glory, with the screams of the dying and the cheers of the victorious. Humanity was going to war, and humanity was going to win. High Arbiter Velkoth watched the countdown timer with growing impatience. 1 solar cycle. That was the time he had given the humans to surrender. 24 of their primitive hours. And now, with only minutes remaining, there was still no response from the Terran government. "They are either very brave or very stupid," Commander Threx muttered beside him. "Stupid," Velkoth decided. "They are too young as a species to understand what they face. Very well, if they choose destruction, we will give them destruction. Signal the fleet to prepare for attack." The order went out across 10,000 ships. Weapon arrays powered up. Shield generators hummed with energy. Commanders prepared their crews for the slaughter that was about to begin. And then the sensors went dark. "What is happening?" Velkoth demanded. The sensor officer worked frantically at his console, his tentacles flying across the controls. "Unknown interference, High Arbiter. Something is jamming our detection systems. I cannot see anything beyond our own hull." Before Velkoth could respond, the first explosion lit up the void. A Concorde cruiser, the pride of Silther, vanished in a ball of fire. One moment it was there, shields glowing, weapons charged. The next moment, it was gone, replaced by a cloud of debris and frozen corpses. "What hit us?" Velkoth screamed. "Where did that come from?" No one could answer. The sensors were useless, filled with static and false readings. Communications were jammed, turning the mighty Armada into 10,000 blind and deaf ships. The Concorde commanders could not coordinate, could not share information, could not even warn each other about the attack. And the humans were just getting started. From behind Jupiter's massive bulk, the Terran fleet emerged like wolves from the shadows. Their ships were smaller than the Concorde vessels, faster and more agile, painted in dark colors that made them almost invisible against the blackness of space. They moved in strange patterns, not the orderly formations that the Concorde expected, but chaotic swarms that seemed to have no logic. Admiral Cole watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the indomitable will, his smile never wavering. "Fire Patent Delta," he ordered calmly. "Target their engine sections." The human ships unleashed their secret weapons, kinetic accelerators. These were simple devices by galactic standards, just electromagnetic rails that launched chunks of metal at incredible speeds. But that simplicity was their strength. While the Concorde relied on energy shields designed to stop lasers and plasma, they had no defense against solid projectiles traveling at a fraction of light speed. The first salvo tore through a Concorde battleship like it was made of paper. The metal slugs punched through shields, armor, and hull, leaving massive holes that vented atmosphere into the void. Crew members were sucked out into space, their bodies freezing instantly in the cold darkness. "By the ancient gods," Velkoth whispered in horror. "What kind of weapons are these?" His tactical officer finally managed to get a partial reading through the jamming. "They are using physical projectiles, High Arbiter. Solid matter accelerated to extreme velocities. Our shields cannot stop them. Then increase shield power. Redirect energy from weapons. That will leave us unable to fight back. Just do it." But it was too late. The human ships were everywhere now, darting between the larger Concorde vessels, striking from angles that seemed impossible. They did not fight fair. They did not follow the rules of civilized warfare. They used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and feints that left the Concorde commanders completely confused. On the bridge of the Terran destroyer Swift Justice, Captain James Marino led his crew through the chaos with wild enthusiasm. "Hard to port," he shouted. "Give me a firing solution on that carrier." The Swift Justice spun on its axis, dodging a plasma blast from a Concorde frigate, and lined up its main gun on the massive carrier Velthorus Triumphant. The kinetic round screamed across space and slammed into the carrier's reactor section. The explosion was beautiful, a massive flower of fire and light that consumed the ship and everyone aboard. 3,000 Concorde soldiers died in an instant, their lives ended by a weapon they had never even imagined. "Yes," Captain Marino roared. "That is for every species you ever conquered. That is for every civilization you ever enslaved. Welcome to human war." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out again and again. Concorde ships fell by the dozens, then by the hundreds, their crews unable to adapt to the strange new tactics they faced. The humans were not fighting a war. They were conducting a massacre. Velkoth watched his mighty armada crumble with growing despair. Ships that had conquered empires were exploding. Commanders who had never known defeat were dying. The perfect formation he had assembled was breaking apart into chaos. "High Arbiter," his communications officer called out. "I am receiving surrender requests from multiple ships. Our captains want permission to retreat." "Denied." Velkoth snarled. "We outnumber them 30 to 1. We cannot lose to these primitives." But the numbers did not matter. What good were 10,000 ships if they could not see their enemy? What good were advanced weapons if they could not penetrate human defenses? The Concorde had built their military on traditions and rules that had worked for 50,000 years. The humans had thrown away the rulebook and written their own. And then the Marines arrived. Terran assault shuttles launched from the larger human vessels, carrying squads of armored soldiers toward the crippled Concorde ships. These Marines wore powered exoskeletons that gave them the strength of 10 men, and they carried weapons designed for close-quarters combat in the corridors and chambers of enemy vessels. The first boarding action hit the Concorde frigate Sword of Justice. Human Marines breached the hull, cut through the airlock, and stormed into the ship with ruthless efficiency. The Concorde crew tried to fight back, but they were no match for the heavily armored Terrans. "Secure the engine room," Sergeant Maria Vasquez ordered, leading her squad through the blood-soaked corridors. "Do not let them scuttle the ship." The Concorde soldiers fell before her like grass before a scythe. Their energy pistols could not penetrate marine armor. Their fragile bodies could not withstand human strength. Within minutes, the frigate was captured, its crew either dead or surrendering. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Ship after ship fell to human boarding parties. The proud warriors of the Concord found themselves prisoners, forced to kneel before the species they had planned to enslave. On the Eternal Dominion, Velkoth received reports of the disaster with numb disbelief. Half his fleet was destroyed or captured. The other half was in full retreat, fleeing toward the edge of the system. The greatest armada in galactic history had been defeated in less than 6 hours. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are primitives. They should not be capable of this." But the evidence was undeniable. The void was filled with the wreckage of Concord ships, with the bodies of Concord soldiers, with the dying dreams of Concord glory. The humans had won, and they had won decisively. And somewhere on the bridge of the indomitable will, Admiral Marcus Cole raised a glass of whiskey and toast. "Welcome to the galaxy, you arrogant fools. Class is now in session." The battle was over, but the questions were just beginning. High Arbiter Velkoth sat in his command chair, surrounded by the smoking ruins of his bridge, watching the human fleet move through the wreckage of his armada. His mighty flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was crippled and powerless, its engines destroyed, its weapons offline, its shields completely gone. He was a prisoner on his own ship, waiting for the humans to come and claim their prize. Around him, his surviving officers sat in shocked silence. They could not understand what had happened. They could not accept that they had lost. For 50,000 years, the Concord had been invincible. They had conquered every species they encountered. They had crushed every rebellion. They had built an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. And now, in a single afternoon, a species that had been sailing among the stars for barely 3 centuries had torn that empire apart. "How?" Commander Threx asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How did they do this to us?" Velkoth had no answer. He had studied the humans before the battle. He had read their history, analyzed their technology, examined their society. On paper, they were nothing special. Their ships were crude. Their weapons were simple. Their population was tiny compared to the combined might of the Concord. And yet they had won. The view screen flickered to life, and a human face appeared. It was the same woman who had answered the ultimatum, Admiral Chen Wei, still wearing that mysterious smile that had haunted Velkoth since their first conversation. "High Arbiter," she said pleasantly. "I hope you are comfortable. We have sent medical teams to assist your wounded. Please inform your crew that any cooperation will be met with kindness." Velkoth found his voice. "You have defeated us. What do you want? Tribute? Territory? Slaves?" Admiral Chun laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. No, nothing like that. We just wanted to talk. You came here with so many questions about humanity, and we thought we should give you some answers." "Answers? What answers?" Chun leaned forward, her eyes meeting his through the screen. "You want to know how we won. You want to know how a young species with primitive technology defeated the mighty Galactic Concord. The answer is simple. You do not understand what humans are." She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display shifted to show images of Earth, humanity's homeworld. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green, with white clouds swirling across its surface. "Look at our world," Chun continued. "It seems peaceful from space. But it is not. Earth is what we call a death world. Everything on our planet is trying to kill us." The images changed, showing natural disasters, earthquakes splitting the ground, volcanoes spewing fire, hurricanes destroying cities, tsunamis swallowing coastlines. Our planet shakes and burns and floods. The weather changes without warning. The ground itself opens up and swallows us. We have survived ice ages that froze half our world and heat waves that turned fertile land into desert. More images appeared. Predators with massive teeth, venomous snakes, poisonous spiders, diseases spreading through populations. Everything on our world evolved to compete, to fight, to survive. We share our planet with creatures that hunt us, parasites that feed on us, and diseases that kill millions. We are not the strongest species on our world. We are not the fastest. We are not the most deadly. Chun smiled again, but this time there was something fierce in her expression. But we are the most stubborn. We refuse to die. When the ice came, we built fires. When the predators hunted us, we made weapons. When disease struck, we invented medicine. Every challenge our world threw at us, we overcame. And we did it by working together. The images shifted again, showing human history. Ancient tribes hunting together, armies marching to war, scientists collaborating in laboratories, astronauts stepping onto alien worlds. For 10,000 years we fought each other. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We killed millions of our own kind in wars over land, religion, and ideas. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire civilization. We came close to extinction more times than we can count. Velkoth listened with growing horror. The Concord species had evolved on gentle worlds, planets where resources were plentiful and threats were rare. They had never faced the constant struggle for survival that humans endured every day. And through all of that, Chun continued, we learned. We learned how to fight. We learned how to adapt. We learned how to turn our greatest weaknesses into our greatest strengths. When you came here with your 10,000 ships, you thought you were facing primitives. But you were facing the survivors of 1,000,000 battles. The descendants of warriors who refused to surrender. The children of a world that tried to kill them every single day. She leaned back in her chair, her smile softening. The Concord conquers species who evolved in paradise. You have defeated civilizations that never knew real conflict, that settled disputes through rituals and negotiations. But you have never ever faced a species like humanity. We do not fight because we want to. We fight because we have to. Because survival is written into our very bones. Velkoth felt something he had not felt in 300 years of conquest. Fear. True, deep, primal fear. What do you want from us? He asked again. We want peace, Chun answered simply. We did not ask for this war. You brought it to us. We would have been happy to trade, to share knowledge, to learn from each other. But you came here to enslave us, so we showed you what happens when you threaten humanity. She stood up, her image filling the screen. The Concord has ruled the galaxy through fear for 50,000 years. Today, that rule ends. Not because we will conquer you, but because we have shown the galaxy that the Concord can be beaten. Every species you have ever oppressed is watching this broadcast right now. Every civilization you have ever crushed is seeing what humanity has accomplished. The fear that held your empire together is gone. Velkoth felt his heart sink. She was right. The Concord's power depended on the belief that they were invincible. Now that belief was shattered. Rebellions would spring up across the galaxy. Subjugated species would rise against their masters. The empire would crumble. You have not just defeated our armada, he whispered. You have destroyed everything we built. Yes, Chun agreed. But we are also offering you something new. A chance to build something better. A galaxy where species work together as equals. Where knowledge is shared freely. Where the strong help the weak instead of crushing them. That is the human way. We fight hard, but we also forgive. We destroy our enemies, but we also rebuild them as friends. She extended her hand toward the screen, a gesture of friendship that Velkoth recognized from human cultural databases. The choice is yours, High Arbiter. You can cling to the old ways and watch your empire burn. Or you can accept our hand and help us build a new future. What will it be? Valkoth stared at the screen for a long moment, his ancient mind struggling to process everything he had learned. The humans were not primitives. They were not simple. They were the most terrifying species he had ever encountered. A race of survivors who refused to stay down, who turned every defeat into a lesson, who faced impossible odds with a smile and a joke. And they were offering mercy to the very enemies who had come to enslave them. "I need time to think," he said finally. Chun nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need. We will be here when you are ready." The screen went dark, leaving Velkoth alone with his thoughts and the ruins of his dreams. 3 days had passed since the Battle of Sol. The wreckage of the Concorde Armada still drifted through space, slowly being collected by human salvage crews. Of the 10,000 ships that had come to conquer Earth, 4,000 were destroyed, 3,000 were captured, and the remaining 3,000 had fled into the darkness between stars. The greatest military force in galactic history had been broken in less than 6 hours. And now, the survivors were receiving an invitation they never expected. Admiral Marcus Cole stood in the grand hall of the Indomitable Will, watching his crew prepare for the most unusual dinner party in human history. Long tables were being set with fine china and crystal glasses. Chefs were preparing dishes from a dozen different human cultures. Musicians were tuning their instruments for entertainment. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Captain Okonkwo asked, standing beside him. "These are the same aliens who came to enslave us. Now we are throwing them a feast?" Cole smiled. "That is exactly why we are doing it. The Concorde has ruled through fear for 50,000 years. They expect us to torture their prisoners, to humiliate their leaders, to treat them the way they would treat us. Instead, we are going to show them something they have never seen: mercy." The doors opened, and the first guests arrived. High Arbiter Velkoth walked into the hall with slow, uncertain steps, flanked by a dozen other Concorde commanders. They had been cleaned and fed, their wounds treated by human doctors, their dignity preserved despite their defeat. Now they were being welcomed as guests instead of prisoners. Velkoth looked around the hall with confusion in his eyes. Beautiful music filled the air. Delicious smells drifted from the kitchens. Human officers smiled and offered greetings as if this were a celebration among friends. "This is very strange," he muttered to Commander Threx. "I do not understand these beings at all," Threx agreed. Admiral Cole approached them with a warm smile and an extended hand. "High Arbiter Velkoth, welcome aboard the Indomitable Will. Please, come in. Make yourselves comfortable. Dinner will be served shortly." Velkoth stared at the offered hand, remembering Admiral Chun's similar gesture 3 days ago. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and took it. Cole's grip was firm but gentle, a gesture of respect between equals. "Why are you doing this?" Velkoth asked. "We came to destroy you. We came to enslave your species. You should hate us." Cole released his hand and gestured toward the tables. "Hate is easy. Anyone can hate. But hate does not build anything. It only destroys. Come, let me explain." He led the alien commanders to a table and helped them find seats. Human officers sat beside them, breaking bread with beings who had been their enemies just days ago. Wine was poured and food was served, and slowly, the tension in the room began to fade. "For most of our history," Cole began, "humans believed that might makes right. We conquered each other, enslaved each other, destroyed each other. We thought that was the only way to survive." He lifted his glass of wine, studying the red liquid in the light. "But we learned. Through centuries of war and suffering, we learned that cooperation is stronger than domination. Nations that trade with each other rarely fight each other. Cultures that share ideas grow faster than those that isolate themselves. The strong can lift up the weak, and in doing so, they make themselves even stronger. Velkoth listened with growing wonder. These were not the words of a conqueror. These were the words of a philosopher, a teacher, a being who saw the universe in ways that the Concord had never imagined. You built your empire through fear, Cole continued. Every species in your Concord is afraid of every other. They cooperate because they are terrified of what would happen if they did not. But that kind of alliance is fragile. It crumbles at the first sign of weakness. He set down his glass and looked directly at Velkoth. Humanity wants something different. We want an alliance based on trust, on mutual benefit, on genuine friendship. We want to share our knowledge and learn from yours. We want to explore the galaxy together, not as masters and servants, but as partners. But we attacked you. Velkoth protested. We tried to enslave you. How can you forgive that? Admiral Chun Wei, who had been listening from a nearby table, stood up and joined the conversation. Because forgiveness is strength, she said simply. Holding on to anger and resentment only hurts the one who holds it. We have every right to be angry at the Concord. You threatened our families, our homes, our future. But if we let that anger control us, we become just like you. She sat down across from Velkoth, meeting his eyes with her steady gaze. Besides, you did not know any better. The Concord has been doing this for 50,000 years. You were taught that conquest is natural, that domination is right, that the strong must crush the weak. Those are the values you grew up with. How can we blame you for acting according to everything you ever learned? Velkoth felt something stirring in his chest, an emotion he could not identify. Was it shame? Was it hope? Was it something else entirely? What do you want from us? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want you to learn, Cole answered. We want you to go back to your people and tell them what you have seen. Tell them that there is another way. Tell them that humanity is not their enemy, but could be their greatest ally. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with passion. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. There are stars to explore, mysteries to solve, challenges to overcome. Instead of fighting each other for scraps of power, we could work together to achieve things none of us could accomplish alone. Faster than light travel, unlimited energy, perhaps even immortality. The possibilities are endless, if only we have the courage to reach for them together. Around the table, the Concord commanders exchanged glances. They had come expecting torture and execution. Instead, they had found dinner and philosophy. They had expected to meet barbarians. Instead, they had found teachers. I need to think about this, Velkoth said slowly. Everything you say goes against a lifetime of belief. I cannot simply abandon everything I was taught. We are not asking you to abandon anything, Chun replied gently. We are asking you to consider new possibilities. Take your time. Talk to your people. And when you are ready, come back to us. We will be waiting. The dinner continued for several more hours, filled with conversation, laughter, and the first tentative steps toward understanding. By the end of the evening, the Concord commanders had learned more about humanity than decades of intelligence gathering had revealed. And humanity had learned that even ancient enemies could become new friends. As the guests departed, Velkoth paused at the door and turned back to face Admiral Cole. I still do not fully understand you, the alien admitted. Your species is violent and peaceful, cruel and kind, terrifying and welcoming. You are a contradiction that defies logic. Cole laughed. That is the thing about humans. We contain multitudes. We are everything at once, and we would not have it any other way. Velkoth nodded slowly, a new light dawning in his ancient eyes. Perhaps that is your true strength. Not your weapons or your tactics, but your ability to be anything you need to be. Now you are starting to understand, Cole replied with a grin. The alien turned and walked into the corridor, his mind full of new ideas and strange hopes. Behind him, the humans began cleaning up the hall, already planning for the next challenge, the next opportunity, the next step in their endless journey among the stars. Outside, the galaxy waited, vast and mysterious and full of possibility. Humanity had announced its presence with fire and fury, but it would build its legacy with wisdom and compassion. The age of the Concord was over. The age of humanity had just begun. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the other species of the galaxy were watching, waiting, and beginning to hope. The invincible conquerors had been humbled. The impossible had happened. Perhaps, just perhaps, a new era was dawning. An era where the galaxy would smile together, just as humanity had smiled in the face of certain doom.